Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Ace on Music. I'm joined by Sean and Mark, and new member of our team here, Emma. So, over the last few weeks, we've had a lot of stuff in the media about the COVID pandemic starting to come under control with the use of vaccines and things like that. And as a result, there's a lot of places starting to open up a little bit more. Various governments are starting to lift the restrictions on mass gatherings, and so we can now start to see the end, or the light at the end of the tunnel that'll take us back to doing live shows. But there's a lot of controversy and going on right now about how actually we're going to tackle doing live shows to promote people's safety and still get ahead with this. And the thing that's been interesting over the last little while is the amount of different solutions that are coming up to this, and various places are trying different things. Now, at the outset of this conversation, one thing that I really do want to make clear is that all of us here on the show, we're all fully vaccinated, and we go into that kind of an idea. But you know, I know that obviously, down to the statistics, that at least half of the population of the United States isn't vaccinated, and other countries have, you know, similar numbers and things like that. So various governments and various companies have started coming up with some ideas about how they can make this all come together and make live shows happen again. And right now, at least in my opinion, a lot of the stuff in the media is driven about what the governments of the world are doing, whether it's state or federal, on various levels, and how they're dealing with this. For example, New York State has now is one of the first states, Hawaii has now joined them, to start experimenting with this concept of a vaccine passport. Basically, it would be an app that you would have on your smartphone or something like that, where you could register with the particular app that you're fully vaccinated. So using an app like this after you've registered with the various bodies showing that you're fully vaccinated would allow you to go to mass gatherings in New York. They're also doing a program hand in hand with this, that if you are not a vaccine person right now, that you can get a COVID test within 24 hours of attending the event, and if you can prove that you came up negative, then they will let you in. But more and more, what I see happening now is that it's actually corporate level that's driving this whole body rather than governments, because and let's face it, corporations are really the root of all of this sort of stuff. You can say that a government's making a plan, but governments don't make plans unless the deep pockets that are backing them are in on that idea. So there's a couple of big challenges being met right now with regards to COVID and live shows. And the first one is something that I really wanted to talk to you about, Mark, is the litigious nature of our society and the fact that corporations in general are going to have to deal with the idea that there are going to be lawsuits. If you're going to hold a huge public event and people go to this thing and they get infected at the event and they can somehow prove that they were infected at the event, then you're going to go after the deepest pockets possible. And this is an issue that's actually causing a lot of problems with some of the festivals that were planning to go ahead this summer. In the UK, there was several big ones, Rambling Man and some other ones, that had decided to go ahead. But they couldn't get insurance. No company wanted to touch this with a 10-foot pole, and so the shows get canceled. So this is all being driven on the legal side of things. So, Mark, you know, with your background in law, and I know that you also keep up on this sort of stuff, what are your thoughts from a legal perspective about where this is going to go and how it's affecting the whole thing right now?
You know, I think it's a good question and a fair one, because it's been out there quite a bit from the very beginning of COVID. But I will tell you, I think that a lot of this is more about covering legal fees than about liability. I don't think there's any way anybody could ever prove causation with respect to where somebody received, got COVID at this point. It's out there. And so a fundamental, if you were to look at what a lawsuit means, you need to have a duty. You have to breach the duty. You have to have causation and damages. It's sort of law school 101. So do you even have a duty to protect the audience from COVID? Well, I don't know that you even have a duty. You have maybe a responsibility to do temperature checks if the law says you do, or something like that, which are not even reliable. Did you breach the duty? Well, did you do what you said you were going to do? And then causation. And really? Like, you can prove causation with respect to where you got COVID. And so I don't see this stuff lasting. Just like you don't get to prove somebody got the flu or hepatitis or something else. These have never been claims that have held up to businesses, to that responsibility, and I don't expect it to be a thing.
Interesting, because, the reason that I wanted to ask that is that, almost anybody who's going to listen to this show is going to know that they've been to a live concert. You bought a ticket from Ticketmaster. And everybody has, at one point or another, flipped over that ticket and seen this barrage of text that is on the back of every concert ticket out there, basically precluding Ticketmaster or the venue or the artist from being sued for various things, like if the lead singer throws a microphone into the audience and it smashes you in the teeth, well, that's your fault. You came to the show, and that's what happened, and that's that.
That's right.
But, are we going to start seeing stipulations on the back of tickets that say, by going to this event, you agree to assume the risk that you're going to get COVID-19 by being in a large event? I guess that's
well, sure. And to that point, those have already been out there. You go to a baseball game and you sign a release that you get hit in the head with a baseball. It's not anybody's fault, even if it virtually happens intentionally. It's not. It is not. The venues themselves have never really been liable for the acts of the entertainment itself. I mean, there have even been some fantastic lawsuits, and just because the name has escaped me right now, I'm not going to chime in, where an act walked on stage pissed drunk, didn't perform more than like 4 seconds, walked off the stage, and the audience sued to try to get their money back and lost, because you go to watch the event that is presented to you, and that is the artist's choice, not the venue. And
nowhere on the tickets does it say they're going to play for 90 minutes or whatever.
That's right. So I can't imagine how. I tend to think a lot of this stuff is a flash in the pan. You even have states out there, obviously the more conservative states out there, saying vaccine passports are actually illegal in that state. Mm-hmm. Of course, there may be some court challenges as you talk about, well, what is the right of a business versus the right of the government to, a business has the right to a certain extent to decide who is served. But apart from that, I mean, I think that what we have here is a devaluation of COVID. It used to be the worst thing ever, and now it's gradually becoming another version of the flu. And we don't sue for the flu, and I don't know how a year from now or 6 months from now we're going to be suing for COVID.
Well, you said a lot of interesting things in there. And, for example, one of the states that leapt to immediately make demanding of vaccine passports illegal was Florida. And that has caused a huge rift between them and the cruise line industry right now, because the cruises by their very nature have been hotbeds of COVID infection, and you're locked in this boat for however many days with all these people. And I mean, Sean and I, we've been on a number of cruises, these rock cruises that they do with these bands. And I remember the last one we went on was literally like a month before lockdown happened.
Literally like maybe a week, 2 weeks.
Yeah, and the lockdown happened, and COVID was already in the news, and everybody was aware that it was happening. But here was 3,500 people on this boat going to the Grand Cayman Islands and back. And I mean, they stepped it up. I mean, you couldn't walk 10 feet without having a hand sanitizer dispenser and all throughout the ship and everything. But, I have no idea what ended up happening. But again, because of the litigious nature of the society, I know Norwegian and Royal Caribbean have both said that they are going to require proof of vaccination in order to go onto their ships. And Florida government has said, you can't do that. You can't demand that people be vaccinated. And so now they're seriously considering leaving Florida as their ports of departure and going to other states on the southern end so that they can do this.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, you're introducing quite a few fascinating subjects, one of which is maritime law and who actually has jurisdiction of those boats. I think we're a little on the young side to be able to predict how a 1-week-old law is going to actually impact businesses, especially multi-jurisdictional businesses. And obviously you have constitutional issues potentially in terms of what the right of a business to be able to refuse service to somebody. I mean, some of these states have been the greatest advocates for saying a business has every right to decide if you're gay, they don't have to serve you. These are more, these are states that have decided that the business holds all of the rights. And now to turn around and say, well, but in this particular case, the business shouldn't own the right to decide to not refuse service. And so there's some of this thing going on out there that I think we have to watch how it plays out.
Yeah, it's interesting, and the fact you nailed it on the head there, that individual companies are also looking at how to deal with it, different ways. Buffalo Bills football team was one of the first ones to come out that said that next season they're going to 100% capacity. That's just the decision they made. Other places have made, like for example in Australia, the government said that as of April 10th they're going open 100%, but they're doing it so that if the event is less than 1,000 people in attendance, then they can do 100%. If it's over 1,000 people, then they want to restrict it to 75% attendance. The amount of different solutions to this problem are as varied as the number of companies that are out there. Everybody's doing their own thing. But one of the things, speaking from the music business side of things, one of the things that is affecting us directly is how an international touring artist is going to deal with COVID and touring. I manage 9 different bands with my business partner, and over the course of those 9 bands, you have, at least 4 or 5 members per band, and then you have crew that goes with every band. So you're dealing with overall maybe a couple hundred people involved here. And of those couple hundred people, some of them are not comfortable taking the vaccine. Some of them are. Some of them, just won't do it at all. And so now we're running into these issues where, as a touring musician, you're having to do a lot of flights. You're having to stay in hotels constantly. And some airlines are demanding proof of vaccination or are threatening to do that going forward. Some hotel chains the same way. And the alternative, of course, is to get COVID tested, rapid tests every step of the way if you're going to get onto a plane, if you're going to get into a hotel or whatever. But the added expense of doing that, it's really going to be phenomenal. When you start talking, you say in an average touring party, maybe 10 to 12 people, and if 10 to 12 people go to an airport and they all have to pay £100 to do a COVID test, well then you've just added £1,200 or like about $2,000 onto the budget of your tour. So I also had promoters come to me and say that for the safety of their own staff and the people who they've employed, that if they're going to hire our band to come play, they want the entire band and crew to be vaccinated. So it's been a challenge because we have to. I have some members of the bands who are not at all comfortable getting the vaccine and don't want to do it, but they're being faced with this reality that if they don't do it, it's going to be very difficult for them to make a living in this post-COVID or mid-COVID world that we're in. So, what do you think about all that? I mean, you're at my right hand for almost all of this.
Yeah. Well, honestly, it comes down to liability, right? If people don't want to take the vaccine, they want to get sick. It's like having unprotected sex. You're gonna, things can happen. So, you know, it's a very controversial topic, and I'm hoping by next year that we're not even going to have this conversation anymore, because everything's going to kind of calm down about COVID, and who knows, there might be even something new coming our way. But
okay, well, let me ask this to both of you then. We all three of us are fully vaccinated. Mm-hmm. So if a artist who you liked was playing a show tomorrow in your town, would you feel comfortable going?
I would.
How about you, Mark?
I'm getting more comfortable. That's what I mean. I think we're in a transitional phase where COVID is being devalued.
You're right.
And I think that it's not just the vaccine. It's about just the way it's being perceived. And I think what wasn't comfortable a month ago or 2 months ago is now more comfortable, and we're all getting to a point where we're going to find our own status quo, and it will be what it is. The American population, unlike other populations in the world, have never been comfortable wearing masks.
Yeah.
You know, and even during this stage of COVID, where, you know, the American population is not, the Asian population in certain countries is, and is much more comfortable in that environment. So,
you know, it's where it's, if you would have asked me this 3 weeks ago, I would have said something different. Like, I went to the doctor a couple weeks ago, and he asked me if I got my vaccine. And he goes, you know, it's a liability issue, but they don't really talk about it. But it's proven. Scientists have proven that after you take the vaccine, that you don't, not only does it protect you, but it protects you from spreading it from somebody. So
there seems to be a lot of controversy on that front, and I keep hearing different things from different bodies. But
yeah,
like you though, I was the same way. I mean, I was one of the most staunch follower of the rules, the COVID rules, staying home, social distancing, masks, all this sort of thing, and once I got vaccinated and I was with a group of friends, she was actually my business partner and Sean, and a couple of weeks ago we went for the first time into a restaurant. First time in a year and a half that I had been to a restaurant and had a meal. And it was one of the strangest feelings to sit down at that table and peel off your mask in public. It was like any time in the last year and a half that I'd walked out the door, that mask was on my face and it didn't leave until I walked back into the house. And suddenly here I am in this public area with people around and I'm not wearing a mask anymore. And I will fully admit that having the vaccine emboldens you. At least it emboldened me a great deal to go. And since then, I've gone to a couple of other restaurants with people who, you know, I was very sure were vaccinated as well. But even so, you know, the argument a friend of mine gave to me the other day was, well, if you're fully vaccinated, then, you know, why do you care? I mean, if somebody else decides to take the risk and they're not vaccinated, then they're the one taking the risk, and you're you know, you're protected as much as you can be under current science. But
well, we've been going through this for over a year and a half, right? So obviously it does something to your psyche too. Like, you know, I'm getting anxiety getting in, you know, when I go in crowds and going into the store. Regardless if I'm vaccinated, I have a different feeling being close to people now. It's a lot different than when, you know, a year and a half ago. I pay attention to it, you know.
True. Yeah, I mean, going to see a live show, I haven't done that yet. That is, you know, going to live shows is such a huge part of my life and my business. And, you know, in an average year before COVID, I would probably see somewhere between anywhere from 50 to 100 live shows a year. And, you know, even the very last live show that I saw before the lockdown, it was literally a week before the lockdown, my business partner and I, we went to Dusseldorf, Germany to see one of our bands headline an arena show there, where it was Saxon was headlining, Duro, Tigers Pentang, and Diamond Head were supporting. It was sold out, almost 5,000 screaming German metal fans. I stood in the middle of them watching this show with everybody drinking and bumping into each other, and you're literally shoulder to shoulder.
3 days after the cruise.
3 days after having been on the cruise to the Cayman Islands.
I was convinced we both had this thing when we got back.
But, you know, it didn't cause a massive outbreak there, or at least not that was reported in the media. But that was the last time that I was in a crowd like that. And quite frankly, at this stage, I through the experiences I've had in the last 2 weeks, I think I am ready to finally go see a live band again. It all comes down again to the liability issue, as you said. What, other than just making those stipulations, but people are always fond, especially in America, of doing frivolous lawsuits. There's going to be. Do you think that there's going to be an onslaught of these, and regardless of whether they're righteous or not, you still got to pay for your lawyers, right?
Yeah, it's funny. So many frivolous lawsuits are more hype. That some of the most frivolous lawsuits that people think were frivolous actually were not frivolous. And most of the truly frivolous lawsuits get tossed immediately. We are not a society where judges sit around and tolerate nonsensical lawsuits. So some of this is fabrication. It's newsworthy when some dumbass decides to do a dumbassical thing.
Dumbassical.
But it doesn't make it super common. We don't sexually transmitted diseases, for the most part, no litigation. Unless you do it on purpose, unless you infect somebody on purpose, which is battery, you don't see the lawsuits. Transmittable diseases, you don't see people suing other people for giving them the flu when they go to the drugstore, even if you had to stand next to that person for that. We haven't done that in this society, and we're not doing it with COVID. We don't see a rash of lawsuits. This causation thing is causing lawyers to not file lawsuits. They know that they have no ability to get far enough, and it becomes something they could be sanctioned for. So I don't see liability really as a fundamental issue. Obviously, if you want to go and get insurance for a drone, it's hard. You want to go get insurance for COVID, it's hard. But the idea that you're going to need insurance for COVID is not,
it's not realistic.
It's not really realistic, and I don't see it. We don't go and get insurance about giving each other the flu or the human papillomavirus, or it's things that are actually transmittable from person to person, and they always have been. One of them is a cancer that is transmittable from person to person, but we don't test for it, and we don't run around suing each other for that. And so I don't see liability as a long-term driving force, maybe a short-term blip. But ultimately, this becomes a personal responsibility issue and a personal assessment of the risk. And I see that we are resuming to a normalcy very, very quickly in this area.
Me too. The one thing that I have seen is obviously there's every day now. There's more and more shows being announced that are going to go ahead, festivals, tours, and all this stuff, and people are buying them out almost instantly. Obviously the desire for live shows is still as high as it ever was, and people's fear, as you said, of the virus seems to have abated tremendously. So yeah, before I'm thinking, before the end of the summer, we're going to see the first shows that are, massively staged all over the world. You mentioned earlier in your feedback about how some other countries deal with things like the masks and everything different, which brings up a related topic. I have been to Japan a few times with the artists that I travel with. The last time was, I think, 2018. And just as a society there, wearing masks is something that they just do. When you walk down a street in Tokyo, 95% of the people you're going to walk by are wearing masks. This is pre-COVID. It's probably even more extreme now. It's considered to be the thing to do there, so that if you're sick, you're not going to pass it on to other people. There's also a high level of hay fever, and they don't want to sneeze on people and all that stuff. But of course, this summer, Tokyo is hosting the Olympics, and they are in the midst of a large outbreak of COVID there right now. Mm-hmm. And there's some serious talk about whether or not they're going to delay the Olympics. And based on what we're talking about here, I don't really think that should happen. What do you think?
I don't think so either. I mean, they should figure that out and let that happen. I mean, I don't know exactly what's going on over there, but that's, it's controversial topic for sure.
Okay, what do you think, Mark?
I'm not, to the point, to my ongoing theme here, I'm not expecting that it's already been delayed. I'm not expecting the Olympics. I mean, they may have their own safeguards and things like that. I'm not so sure that it'll be delayed. But a lot of this, I exist as a spectator. I try not to predict too many things in the sense that I have no idea what's going to happen, but there's a lot. These athletes have gone through trials. I've been connected to some of those trials. They've been under much more controlled environments. They've not been by invitational like they used to be in some of the sports. They've been by almost a selection committee. You've seen a major change in how the athletes for the Olympics, certainly in the United States, are being selected. So I don't think that'll be an issue. And then the other thing is that with Olympics, they do drug test. So maybe they COVID test too, and you try to keep pure there. And there are already Olympic villages set up and ways of separating the athletes from the fans. Although there are a number of athletes that are uncontrollable for sure. But
yeah.
So I don't. If I were to be in the predicting business, I would say that we're probably going to see them happen.
The Swami Mark. But yeah, I mean, and the thing that you can't ignore over this whole thing, when you have an event on the level of an Olympics, there is a phenomenal amount of money that is poured into staging an event like that. When a country agrees to hold an Olympics, it's billions of dollars they're spending to put on this event. And like you said, Mark, the Olympics already got delayed a year because of COVID, and I can't imagine them delaying it again. So I guess the question is, right now, out of the three of us, would you go to a show right now?
I would, but I would definitely want a place where if I go, there's some space around me. I wouldn't want to be thrown into the floor or general admission. I couldn't handle that, I don't think.
What if they just had the normal seating as in pre-COVID where you're sitting shoulder to shoulder with somebody beside you?
Hopefully I'm with people I know.
Well, what if you aren't?
But I don't know. That's the tough one. I haven't. It's like dabbling your toe in the water. Like, it's
Fair enough.
Is it cold? Is it it's like, I don't know. I probably would. Right now I'm vaccinated, and I've also caught it, so the chance of me getting sick is not going to happen. But yeah, I would go.
How about you, Mark?
I don't right now have a driving force to go to a show. It's if I had my druthers, I'd get on an airplane and go photograph polar bears in Alaska right now. So I don't. It's not like I have this driving need, and so to the extent that there's some risk in the show, even though I don't know that is really my driving factor, I don't have this need. But I'm going to restaurants, and I'm going shopping at this store, and I'm doing all kinds. I mean, people are coming in and out of the studio a bit, so I'm not shying away from the world, but I don't think I'm in a need to go back to a live performance right now.
Well, that brings up an interesting related topic. I mean, where we shoot this podcast is at your studio, which is part of a big actual production studio where they're making motion pictures, they're making television shows. And have you noticed any changes in the last month or so, or since the vaccine has really become so prevalent in our society? Has the day-to-day operations here changed?
Well, so the day-to-day operations on this lot, I would say, generally has not changed, and I don't know whether the movie industry, I think, was on the front end of trying to protect itself. It was, talk about content, talk about product, consumable, it's a funny word for entertainment, but
it is, yeah.
But Netflix, Amazon, Disney, Warner Brothers and Hulu and everybody else is producing content that is being consumed at an unbelievable pace. It's probably, among the biggest industries across the board, and it was the most missed. It was what kept people sane. and it had a need to get back in business. And when these productions shut down, hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars are immediately lost. It's not like a normal business. And so, and they do send people home. And so if you were to go to the movie that's filming out there right now, which is an Amazon production, they are COVID testing. They have safety trucks. They are monitoring the facilities. They have COVID compliance officers, just like they did 6 months ago. So I don't know that there's a change now. And as a matter of fact, I think that this business is going to lag when it comes to opening itself up and stopping. They're still testing people every single day on those sets.
Yeah, well, you nailed it there. You know, the television and movie industry really did get out ahead of this, because we're only now starting to see the true repercussions of that, because it takes, you know, X amount of months or a year or whatever from the time they actually film something to the time that the actual end user consumes it, as you used the term. And you're seeing a lot of shows, especially virtual reality, or not virtual reality, but reality-based shows where they have found solutions. I think the first one that hit my radar was a show from England called The Great Bake Off, or The Great Baking Show, or whatever. And basically, the way they dealt with it is they had an isolated location, and everybody in the crew and in the contestants got tested and everything. And then once they were in the show, they shot it over the course of, I don't know, 3 weeks or something like that. You couldn't leave. You had to stay there. And, you know, we've heard all kinds of things. Like Shark Tank was another one where they've taken all these precautions to distance everybody and make sure nobody gets hurt. The new season of Top Chef is out now. They're doing similar things. I was very curious to see how these cooking shows would get affected by this sort of thing. You know, they always brought in guests, judges to taste things and all this stuff. And how is that going to happen now? But yeah, obviously, you hear about all the new series coming out for the various shows, so their solutions are obviously working. And, you know, we're going to find solutions as far as concerts as well. I mean, but at the end of the day, you're going to take a risk going to any live show, whether it's COVID, whether it's influenza, whether it's whatever. It's
getting LSD dropped in your drink.
Yeah, right. You know, or whatever weirdo things you can think of. So, yeah, I mean, I think that we have a solution in place now. People are at least educated about this now. So I think normalcy, or at least the 2021 version of it, is around the corner for us, right?
Are you comfortable seeing a show like at the Forum or Hollywood Bowl or something?
You know, I am. And my mentality on this whole subject has really changed over the last couple of weeks. After I got the fully vaccinated thing, a lot of my fears and trepidations about a lot of that stuff was abated. And, you know, I'll be the first one to defend anybody's right not to take the vaccine. You know, you should have complete control and utter rights over what you put into your body. But, you know, we're going to make decisions based on what decisions that you make. So,
right.
But anyway, yeah, so a very, very heavy subject, but something that I think is part of the new reality of what we're sitting in. But I think you nailed it, Mark. I mean, it's the new reality, and with every passing day, it's becoming less and less of an issue. So there we are. Anyway, I would love to hear from any of you listeners out there. Are you vaccinated? Have you been to a show yet? Because there are shows happening in certain parts of the world. And are you planning to go to any shows? I would love to hear it. You can always email us at acetalksmusic@gmail.com. You can leave comments in YouTube or in Buzzsprout or whatever platform you're checking us out on. We'd love to hear from you. So in the meantime, I really want to thank Mark and Sean for this heated conversation. I really enjoyed it. And I want to thank all of you for listening. And remember, we still have our After Hours show on the patreon.com platform, where we talk about some other things afterwards. So come join us there and check it out. So in the meantime, stay safe, and I hope to see you at a show real soon.